Hello there, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan, and spoiler alert, Stila Guerrera loves the smell of ronium in the morning. And that is meant to be taken literally.
Maybe you're like me. Maybe you love the smell of it. And maybe you breathe just a little too deeply, burned from the inside.
Yeah. So this explains a lot to me. This is like the final piece of the puzzle that kind of gives me clarity on who Stila Guerrera is, who the partisans are, and why they are the way they are. You know, a lot of things happen in the second arc of Andor. Love, trauma, fashion, resistance, and of course the underlying tyranny that permeates everything. But it was our little journey to Dakar that really shocked me. Yes, the same Dakar that the resistance would hide on during the war against the First Order. When we first arrived there, we see Stila Guerrera's partisans occupying a small base on the planet. As usual, they're on the run from the Empire and, looking for a safe place to be, probably hiding from the consequences of their last destructive act while planning their next destructive act. Now, these episodes take place about a year after the first 3 episodes in the second season. And so one of the Ferrix crew, Wilmon Pac, has now been sent by Luthen Rael to the partisans. And it turns out Wilmon Pac is quite the engineer. He seems to have picked up a lot while working with his father at their salvage yard on Ferrix, back when he was a kid like 20 years ago. I mean, no, it's more like 2 years, but man, this guy has aged a lot. Wilmon Pac is no longer a boy. The death of a father at the hands of the Imperial Gestapo can definitely do that to you, as well being on the run for pretty much every day of your life. Wilmon Pac wasn't just some normal fugitive. He was the individual who tossed a pipe bomb into a crowd on Ferrix, which then set off a crate of detonators. The secondary explosion killed a lot of people, and then led to Imperial troopers opening fire on an unarmed crowd. I actually mentioned in a previous video that I believe that Wilmon Pac will probably join the partisans, because that's kind of the trajectory his life is going in.
On a side note, I also believe that Wilmon Pac, the kid who threw that detonator at Ferrix, will slowly be won over by Stala's more violent faction, as his violent techniques are going to suit his personality better. I actually think we're looking at this kid in the scene here, but I have to do a little more research before I figure out exactly what's going on here.
But how it happens, of course, was not expected at all. You see, Luthen has loaned Wilmon Pac to the partisans for a very specific case. Stila and his men want to steal ronium. This is an extremely volatile starship fuel, and as a strategic commodity, getting access to it was really difficult. And so Stila and the partisans try the next best thing, which is to tap into a ronium pipeline and then siphon the material for their own purposes. This is a pretty good idea because, pipelines are really hard to guard. You might have a few patrols here or there, but generally you can attack them pretty easily. Where Imperial troopers are usually concentrated are around the refineries or the pumping areas. Now, the process of tapping into a ronium pipeline is a bit more complicated than one would expect. The process actually requires a specific machine to hack into the pipes safely. And this device, which kind of resembles a safe cracking machine, is being delivered by Wilmon Pac. And unbeknownst to him, now he's going to have to train one of Stila's own engineers on how to use it in all of its complexity. And Wilmon Pac doesn't get to leave until that is finished. Now, it turns out the partisan that Pac is trying to teach Prudy is actually an Imperial plant. Once he's revealed as a traitor, he gets unceremoniously executed by Stila. This makes Wilmon Pac in charge of the device, a very dangerous device.
What's more dangerous than ronium? Not many old pipe poachers out there. Not many who live to tell the tale.
You see, when this device fails, it actually emits a lot of sparks, and around, ronium pipeline, that means huge explosion. But Wilmon is careful, and he's pretty good at what he does. So good that when he's actually on a mission and trying to connect to that volatile ronium pipeline he's trained to connect to, it doesn't really seem to bother him that Stila is just standing there in the background, talking about random stuff.
I was younger than you are now. I was a prisoner. They made a work camp in the jungle.
Okay, maybe not so random. Stila is talking about what happened to him after the Clone Wars ended. You see, Stila was an Andoranian loyalist and had fought against the Separatist-backed king and his droid forces during the Clone Wars. After the war ended and the Republic turned into the Empire, the Imperial military showed up and basically tried to force Stila's resistance fighters to join up with their military. Of course, Stila would refuse to do this and he would get arrested and be thrown into a chain gang in the Andoranian forest, which just sounds absolutely terrible. Now, one day, while in the forest, his group basically is exposed to a rhydonium leak.
Then one day, everyone started to itch. Everyone, all at once. Even the guards. You could feel your skin coming alive. It was the rhino.
So yeah, rhydonium is a highly, highly toxic fuel. According to the warning labels, protection needs to be worn at all times when around its fumes. Failure to do so can result in many terrible things. First, there's the pain, the horrific sensation on the skin, the boils that form shortly after exposure. And of course, inhaling the fumes could change an individual's voice and damage their vocal cords. Long-term exposure of rhydonium eventually leads to brain damage and death. Now, once Wilmon Pac finishes the transfer, Stila Guerrera kind of just walks up into the rhydonium gas that is like leaking out of this machine, and he just puts his face in the gas completely unfazed, takes a deep whiff of all those fumes.
I have always loved you.
What are you doing?
There it is.
How can you do that?
Okay, so this is new, right? This is new. I mean, you can desensitize yourself to certain irritants, like for me, like Bengay and Tiger Balm don't really work that well anymore. Like I could put it under my nose, I could put it under my eyes, and it doesn't hurt. And I've actually heard the same thing can be done. You can desensitize yourself, or some people can, to pepper spray. I've also heard of one person who tries to desensitize himself to snake venom. You should definitely not try both of those things, but you know, you can train yourself to a certain degree to deal with these things. The problem with Stila Guerrera inhaling rhino fumes is that not only is it painful and irritable and damaging to his skin, well, not exactly, actually. Stila Guerrera seems to handle this quite well, but there is other damage being done to the inside of his body, and it's also clearly damaging his brain. As a matter of fact, this actually explains everything. You know, Stila Guerrera isn't just crazy, he's inhaling poisonous fumes. And that brain damage, well, it causes impulsiveness, which got Tech killed. Stila Guerrera is also pretty irrational. He has all these outbursts. His emotions change from one second to another, as witnessed in his conversations with Luthen. Maybe even his paranoia is caused by the brain damage and the fumes. Although, as we've seen with Prudy, that paranoia seems to serve Stila Guerrera quite well. Or did it? You know, after the whole Brasso and Kellen thing, I'm not sure about much anymore. And then there's this last piece of the puzzle that just kind of makes everything make sense.
How can you do that?
Because I understand it. Because she's my sister, Rhino, and she loves me.
Yeah, so Stila Guerrera's sister, Stila, died during the Clone Wars. We talk about her a lot in reference to who Stila Guerrera is and becomes. See, Stila Guerrera was never the leader. He was more like a weapon, a strong fighter who had good tactical instincts to a degree, but he needed to be pointed at the right targets. Stila Guerrera never knew how to focus on the bigger picture. You know, the politics, the larger strategic concerns that a rebel leader has to think about. The Onderonian resistance defeated the Separatists thanks to Stila's leadership, and one of the things she was really good at was talking Stila Guerrera down from his crazier, more impulsive beliefs. She was basically the only person who could actually control him and calm him down. Now, when she died, that is when we saw the weapon that is Stila Guerrera become aimless. Revolutionaries like Stila don't do well when they're just loitering around. They tend to drift towards combat and chaos no matter where they are. Although up until now, I always thought that Stila's madness was driven by all the horrible things he's seen, all the people he's lost, all the terrible deeds he's done. There's also the constant abuse that living on the run in makeshift shelters has on the bones. Then there are also the injuries. The wounds that don't quite heal, shrapnel in the arm, a missing leg that creates constant phantom pain. You know, all those things added up together seems to give us a better clue of what Stila is going through. But now it's kind of clear that it wasn't. You know, when Stila was exposed to what I can only imagine was a huge amount of rhydonium, it completely changed him. You can call it a change in personality, but I call it brain damage. The signs are very clear. I mean, the delusional thinking that somehow this poisonous gas is connected to his sister is a sign of brain damage. It's also very possible that sniffing rhydonium, just like sniffing petrol, can be addictive. This will only cause further damage to Stila's brain. I'm actually beginning to wonder if this operation to get rhydonium is really just mission critical or a junkie trying to get his fix. What's even more strange is that Stila seems to revel in the pain. We can call this desensitization of the nerves, or we can just simply call him a masochist, which really gets more into the crazy psyche of Stila Guerrera. You know, his embrace of pain might be a coping mechanism. It's a way for him to, have some type of control, retain some type of control in this very crazy world he lives in where people are constantly trying to kill him. Or maybe the pain helps him remember his sister and brings her back to life in that moment. Although considering how much time that has gone by and how much rhydonium he's sniffed, it's very likely that Saw's image of his sister by this point is completely fabricated and are just images made by whatever pieces of his brain that are still functioning. I think at the end of the day, Stila Guerrera would have hated to see what Saw had become. What's even crazier is how Wilmon Pac acts. Instead of, just considering the words of Stila Guerrera, he follows his actions by taking his mask off and inhaling all of that rhydonium.
Look at us. Unloved, hunted, cannon fodder. We'll all be dead before the Republic is back, and yet, here we are.
This is the most clarity we ever get from Saw. This acknowledgement of who he is, the suffering he has gone through, and the very clear-eyed prediction that none of them will survive. Well, if Mon Mothma is the future of the rebellion and Luthen Rael is the beginning, Saw Gerrera and his partisans are the very end. And only people with nothing left, like Wilmon Pac, will not look at disgust at Saw Gerrera or with fear or conclusion. Instead, there is just an understanding because they are kindred spirits. There's nothing really tethering Wilmon Pac to this world. After what's happened on Ferrix, he's alone and broken. And Saw, well, he doesn't offer to fix Pac's heart. I mean, if he could do that, he'd probably fix himself first. Instead, what he does is kind of smart. He gives Wilmon an opportunity to at least have control over his own life. When you live under tyranny and are being hunted every day, fearing discovery, you lose that sense of control. You're constantly bombarded with fear, anxiety, and paranoia, things that actually Saw Gerrera is very familiar with. The pursuit of pain, the awful feeling that reminds Saw of his sister, is a coping mechanism. It's a way to finally wrest some control over the pain that controls one's life. It's terribly sad to think about it this way, but this is the truth about the partisans. I mean, these individuals are all dead men. What made them once human and decent is most likely all gone. All that is left is a cult of pain and death. Wilmon Pac joins it by dousing himself in rhydonium gas, sharing in the madness.
Remember this. Remember this moment. This perfect night. You think I'm crazy? Yes, I am. Revolution is not for the sane. Look at us.
Is a person really crazy if they know they're crazy? Is it truly everyone else who's lost? Luthen, Vel, Cassian, Bix, Maya Pei's brigade, the Gorman front? What if Saw Gerrera is right? What if he is the only one with clarity, right? War, revolution, so many people who experience it try to maintain their sense of self. They try to preserve the person they were before the first blasters rang out over their heads. Perhaps that is madness, for Mon Mothma to think that she can maintain some sense of morality while fighting such an evil empire. Perhaps it's also madness that Luthen Rael still has bits and pieces of empathy for the operatives he will surely send to their deaths. Maybe we've all been wrong to call Saw Gerrera a madman. Maybe what's actually happening here is he's the only one who's fully committed to the cause. Either way, he truly is a fascinating character. I believe that this arc in Season 2 is designed to show the wider range of different rebel factions that exist in the galaxy. It is important to show them all, from the naive but desperate Gorman to the shadowy Axis network, to individuals like Cassian Andor and, of course, Saw Gerrera. A reminder of just how horribly things can go wrong. The message is clear to me. If you want rebellion, if you want to resist, take a second, think, and think again, and then look at all these characters here, how damaged they are, many of them based on real-life revolutionaries and historical figures. And then take a look at all the failed rebel movements throughout history. Millions of people have died and are mostly forgotten. It would be irresponsible to not mention that aspect. It's not to say that there are no causes worth fighting for, but considering the fact that many rebels are young, impressionable kids with very little life experience, I actually think this is one of the most important lessons you could teach them.